Hey mamas, and welcome to the Entering Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Marie Bilger, a birth and postpartum doula who is passionate about helping women enter motherhood feeling informed, supported, and empowered. Join us every episode to learn from professionals, special guests, and moms just like you, ensuring that you know what you need to know and discover things that you didn't know before. I believe in you. Let's doula this and let's navigate the transition of entering motherhood together. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Entering Motherhood. Today's episode is one that I really wish every expecting mother had saved on her phone before labor begins, and something that you listen to and really take into consideration before you actually go into labor, before the action really starts, before you're actually birthing your baby. Because when contractions are coming and adrenaline is high and emotions are running deep, that is not the time to start figuring out what you need and having some of these really tough questions, really tough conversations, and really digging into asking some of these questions when you need to be thinking about it. So preparation doesn't mean control necessarily, it means clarity. And so we're really trying to get that clarity locked down. We're really trying to have all of these different conversations so that we can better understand what our hopes and wishes and desires are for birth, for labor. And also some of these questions really bleed into motherhood as well, really just kind of set you up for determining and deciding and figuring out what that looks like. And it can really help just get you in the habit of asking questions and starting conversations and digging a little bit deeper before things actually happen. So today I'm walking you through different questions to ask before you go into labor, and we're breaking it down into questions for your provider, questions for your doula, questions for your partner, questions for other people that are going to be supporting you in your birth space, and also questions for yourself. So this is really important to really asking yourself those hard questions and either just thinking about it, having an open discussion, or also what really helps too is journaling. So those questions for yourself, journaling can be really helpful when it comes to those. So if you can, grab a notebook, maybe start to jot these things down, or just have, your partner or your birth team listen to this episode as well, and just start thinking about some of these questions, because it's so important to prepare. And when we're preparing, when we're calm and when we're having the time and ability to have these conversations, it's so much better. So starting off with your provider really does play a major role in your birth experience. Who you're choosing to have for your provider, whether it's a whole practice or a single provider, it's important to have some of these conversations beforehand and to ask these questions before you're birthing your baby. This might even be some good questions to ask when you're looking for a provider, and some questions to ask when you are just getting started and initiating care with a provider. But overall, I believe all of these conversations, all of these questions should happen well before labor, because it's important to see how they respond, what their reaction is, what their response is, and how that aligns with how you want to birth. And so you're not surprised when something comes up and they say, this is policy, this is practice, this is standard care. You're well aware of what this looks like and what might happen if some of these scenarios come up. Just kind of listing them off. I have 8 different questions, and I'm sure that these questions will also lead to other various questions and conversations that you might have. So generally just starting off, asking them, what's your philosophy around birth? Seeing if they're more hands-on, hands-off, what their view of birth is, what their background is, how they view physiological birth, what they view as medical versus non-medical, and how they see birth themselves. Do they have any children themselves? Are they aware of different births outside of practicing? Just getting an idea of how long they've been doing this, why they became a OB or a midwife or whatever it might be. Just in general, what is their philosophy around birth? Question number 2 is, what is your induction rate and what is your C-section rate? So really understanding what these two different rates are too, and just getting a feel for what their rates are like. Is it high? Do they have a very high induction rate? How often are they recommending that moms get induced? What week gestation are they having moms get induced? What does that look like? What's their cesarean rate? Are these planned cesareans? Are these emergency cesareans? What is their rates looking like? And really not to judge, but to just understand what their practice patterns are, understand what that looks like, and get a feel for what their opinion is when it comes to induction and cesareans as well, and then seeing if that aligns with you and seeing if that sounds good, if that is what your plan is, and if there leaves any room for how you ultimately see your birth going. Question number 3 is, how do you handle labor that isn't progressing on a specific timeline? So this is really important, I feel, especially when you want to go unmedicated, or maybe this is your first birth. Sometimes first-time births are very long, very drawn out, and take a little bit more time than a second or third birth, just because your body is getting used to the sensations, getting used to the movements, getting used to the progression. And so sometimes it just takes a little bit longer. So how does your provider handle that? And what does it look like if you're not progressing by a certain timeline? And what does that timeline look like? Is it every hour they're checking you? Is it every 4 hours? Are they aligned with how you feel things will progress and how you would like things to be done? And really just understanding what that timeline looks like and what that might be like based on your vision of your birth. Number 4 is, what comfort measures are encouraged before any kind of medical intervention. So if you're really inclined to having minimal interventions and you want to be as much hands off as possible, what kind of comfort measures are they encouraging? Are they suggesting that you get a doula? Is their nurse staff very aware of unmedicated birth? What kind of comfort measures are they familiar with? Are they using birth balls? Do they have different techniques that they like to use? Are they suggesting that you stay at home as long as possible? What does this look like, and how are they typically guiding you through labor before they're suggesting any kind of medical intervention, such as Pitocin, things like that, and what does that look like? And then going off of that and leading into more questions would be, what is your approach to pain management? And so this is really important because specifically if you want to go unmedicated, if that is your goal, or if you want to see how long you can go without an epidural beforehand, then it's really important to understand what their approach is to pain management. If you're walking in and you're having a little bit discomfort and they immediately say, "Do you want the epidural? Is that something that you want? We can go get the epidural." When that temptation is there, when that is readily available, and when somebody is asking you that, when you are uncomfortable, it's a little bit harder to say no. And if your plan is to go unmedicated or to go as long as possible without any kind of medication, then this is just a little bit more difficult to manage and to push out of your mind when it is being readily available and offered to you. So maybe just asking them what's their approach to pain management, how their staff handles that, how many women in their practice are going unmedicated, and what that looks like. And also in a bunch of different locations, there is multiple other techniques that are available and offered and there for you to utilize. So asking just what is their approach and what kind of things that they have available to you is going to be a really great conversation, because then you know what all of your options are and you know what all of those different potentials look like. Another question to ask is, who will likely be on call when I go into labor? If you are really looking for one specific person to be there for you when you go into labor, if that one provider is who you want there, then it's really important to be asking, will you be on call? Are you going to be available? Most OB practices rotate through who's on call and who is available. So sometimes they will have you rotating around with different providers at that practice during your prenatal appointments. And so you get to at least meet all the different providers and see who's available and have that exposure, at least meeting one of them beforehand. But again, you want a specific provider, making sure that that's known, making sure if that's possible, and seeing what that's like and how that would be handled is super important to ask beforehand. Because let's say maybe you go in and you're seeing the same provider that you've seen for years. Maybe this is an OB that you have gone just for your yearly checkups and are comfortable and familiar with. And so now you're pregnant and you assume this is going to be the provider that is there for me during my birth. And so really going through that and not making any assumptions and saying, are you going to be who's on call and who's available for me? And what does that look like? And if not, who's going to be on call? And what are their philosophies and ideas and approaches, and going through a lot of these questions over again with them, or just a practice as a whole. Most of the time, OBs in the same practice are going to have very similar mindsets. They have a lot of the same practices, and they are usually very similar in what their approaches are. But making sure that that's kind of talked about and thought about. Most midwives are going to have their own practice, their own individual patients. And so if you are with a midwife, they are going to be who is on call when you're in labor, unless for whatever reason they're at another birth or another situation. And so ask what their backup policy is, and see what would happen if that were to happen, if you were to go into labor when they have another client that goes into labor, and how that would work. So really kind of being familiar with that and seeing what that looks like, and if that aligns with your vision for your birth and what you're looking for. Another question would be, how do you feel about delayed cord clamping? I know this is a little bit of a hot topic sometimes, and a lot of people are hearing about it, are familiar with it. They hear, oh, yes, I want delayed cord clamping, but what does that look like? How does that go? How long about are they waiting to clamp the cord? Are they waiting for it to look a certain way? Are they waiting for a certain time? How is that going? And then along those lines, what about immediate skin to skin? What about, immediately after birth? How is that looking? What is that like? How is it typically done with your practice, with that hospital, with that provider? If you're having a home birth, then same thing. What is this looking like? When are we doing this? How is this working? And then also kind of going back a little bit too with while you're actually in labor, what kind of things are you being hooked up to? Are they doing intermittent monitoring? Are you hooked up to anything else? Are you required to have certain IVs, IV ports? Do you need to have fluids for whatever reason? What kinds of things are you being hooked up to? Is your baby being hooked up to? Are they measuring your heart rate, your baby's heart rate? Are they doing blood pressure? How often are they doing blood pressure? What does that look like? How many things are beeping and turning on and hooking up, and how are you handling that, and what is that looking like? So these are all questions to ask your provider beforehand, so that when you're coming in to the birthing location, or if you are having a home birth, then you're not shocked or surprised by some of these things that are happening and occurring. And you have the ability to know what all of your options are, what all of the different possibilities are, and what that's going to look like, so that you're not not only just surprised, but you are comfortable with all of those different things. So maybe you're going on a hospital tour soon, or you are having your prenatal appointments. These are just different things to ask your provider who's going to know how those things typically work. And like I said, if you are birthing in a hospital and you're going on a hospital tour, then it's important to ask the hospital, like, what am I getting hooked up to? What does that look like? How many nurses are in here? What are the bands like? Can I see the beds? Can I see the rooms? Can I go in the tub? All these different things that are really important, not just, how the hospital looks. Does it look clean? Oh, wow, cool, a bed, a window, nice. Like, actually ask, like, what things do they have on hand? What things are they going to be able to give you to help manage pain, to have comfort measures, to go through progression, and how quickly are they doing interventions or inducing, things like that. Just, having some sort of idea of what this all looks like beforehand. And so going along that too, it's important to ask, if I decline something, how is that going to be documented and handled? It's weird to say, like, am I allowed to say no to that? But it's a good question to just ask them to get their reaction, to get an idea for what they say, because it's important to understand that you do have the right and ability to decline any and all things that are happening to you. Obviously, hopefully, the provider that you choose is going to have your best interest at heart, but it's important to understand that if you feel like something's wrong or not right, or you don't feel comfortable with it, or you want to delay that one thing or postpone something or do things differently, you have the right to decline that and say something differently. But it's also important to understand, like, how is that going to be documented? How is that going to be handled? And what is that going to look like? So just remember, you're not being difficult asking these questions. If they make you feel like you are being difficult, if they kind of roll their eyes, or they're like, oh, yeah, you probably listened to some podcast and that's why you're asking these things, they should be happy that you are looking to be informed and educating yourself and want to know all of your options and possibilities and be informed in this space, because it helps them also, and it shouldn't come off as an inconvenience for them or something that they don't appreciate, because I feel like they should want their patients to be thoroughly informed and educated, and they might not necessarily have the time at their practice to do all of these things. And so it's important that you're seeking these resources and information outside of their practice as well. And that's another thing, like, if you feel like your provider is not answering these questions how you would like or how you thought that they would, then it's always okay to find a new provider and find somebody else that you want birthing your baby and being there while you birth your baby. So knowing that you have options as far as different providers too is just another thing to throw out there. So moving on to questions for your doula. If you're not having a doula, I strongly suggest that you think about it and understand the benefits of having a doula. Even if it's someone that you are meeting with prenatally and you don't feel like you necessarily need somebody there during the birth, maybe hooking up with a local doula that does childbirth education courses in person, or you can always look at our doula-led childbirth education course, Own Your Birth, for more information and getting the information that you need and connecting with either me or Caitlin to ask really deep questions and understand what the benefits of working with a doula are, and just having someone to bounce those ideas off of and to have that support with.
So, questions for your doula specifically are going to be, when do you join me in labor? This looks different for a lot of different doulas. Sometimes they are labor as long as you can with yourself. I'll be there for virtual support, text messaging, phone calls, things like that until things really pick up. Sometimes this also, I always say, it looks different for every client. It looks different for every family, every situation. I try to be there as much as I possibly can for you in the way that you want. And so that might be, hey, I only need support at the hospital. Or, hey, I want you there as long as you possibly can. So it really does look different for each doula. And so that's an important question to ask. Like, when do you join me? What does that look like? And things like that. Another really good question to ask your doula is, how do you support the partners that are in the room? And what does that look like? Do you have any support for partners? Can you support them beforehand? Do you have any tips or tricks for partners who are going to be there and going to be present? Another question to ask your doula is, what does the support look like if my birth takes an unexpected turn? So, what happens if I have an emergency cesarean? What happens if things go a different way? What happens if I need to have an induction? What does it look like if the plan that you currently have or want looks different? And how is that going to differ for that doula? And how are they going to support you differently? What if you plan on going unmedicated or having a home birth and then you get transferred, or you decide that you want an epidural? How does that look different? Another really great question to ask is, how do you help advocate without overstepping, or what does that look like? What is their personal experience with advocating in different settings, maybe home birth, birth center, hospital, wherever you are birthing? How have they advocated for clients in the past, and what does that look like? Another really great question to ask is, what postpartum support do you offer? Do they have a in-home postpartum appointment that they come and they see you? Is that included in their birth package? Do they have any other type of additional postpartum support? Maybe you have one doula for your birth and you have another doula for postpartum support. Or maybe you find somebody who is able to do both of those things. So they support you during your birth and they also are there for you postpartum as well. So you are familiar with them and feel comfortable with them, and you don't need to find somebody else. So what does that support look like postpartum? I always say with my birth clients, you are connected to me for life. If you ever have any questions postpartum, just feel free to text me, ask me, and I can find you the resources that you need, or I can address that question. I am there connected for you if you need any support. So that's really important too. Is it, immediately after you have the baby, they're just out of the picture and they no longer support you? What does that look like, and how do you want that to go? And then maybe the most important question to ask them is, how do you help me feel calm when things are going to get overwhelming? So what kind of techniques and practices and tools and resources do they have that are going to make you feel calm when things might get overwhelming, not go according to plan, when things just might spiral, when you feel like you can't do it anymore, or you just really need that support? So your doula should know your fears and your preferences and your non-negotiables, and how to calm you when things get overwhelming and what that looks like. And so it's really important to ask them, what are you going to do when those things happen? And how does that uniquely cater to you as an individual? Moving on, for questions to ask our partner, this is one that really matters so much, because your partner can either be your anchor or unintentionally add stress into the picture and create some different scenarios that aren't necessary. And it's really important to have these expectations and to have these questions and to have these situations brought up and cleared so that you can feel great when you're in labor and that they can feel better supported as well. So, number one question is, what are you most nervous about when it comes to labor? So, ask your partner, what are you nervous about? What are you worried about? Or what comes up for you when you think about, when I'm going to be in labor? So it's really important to understand, not only your own fears and preferences, but also your partner's fears and preferences and what it might look like for them. Number two, you might already know the answer to this, but how do they handle stress? What are they going to do if things get stressful, if things get out of hand, if things go unexpected, if there's just different things coming up? How are they going to handle that stress? Are they going to get quiet? Are they going to back off? Are they going to need direction? Are they going to be deer in headlights? We can talk about the freeze, flight, fight responses. and kind of go into that. Is that how they might handle stressful situation at the hospital? Do they have previous trauma or experience in hospitals? Are they really familiar with the hospital? Maybe they are a doctor and nurse themselves, or maybe they are familiar with this setting. So they might be able to handle it really well. Just like I said, you probably know the answer to this, but it's really important to have those hard conversations and to ask these questions beforehand so that when you get to it, you've already kind of discussed this and determined what things are going to be like. Number 3 is going off of how you're going to be feeling. If you're overwhelmed, what are they going to do to help support you? So you can ask, if I'm overwhelmed, how can you best support me? What does that look like? What do you think I'll need in the moment? And ask them. And then this can also just be an open conversation around how you would like to be supported. One thing that me and my husband have always discussed is, hey, if I'm like this, then maybe do this. Like if I'm kind of spiraling, or, if I'm saying that I need help, like what that really means is give me some water or get me a snack, or just tell me you love me. Just, whisper supportive, encouraging thoughts into my ear and let me know that you're there. Just hold my hand. Whatever it looks like, just if you get overwhelmed, how does your partner normally support you? What are the things that they do that make you feel comfortable and safe and loved and supported and seen and heard? Those are the same things that you're most likely going to want and need when you are in labor. So what is that looking like? Maybe just have a list of different things that you think you're going to like or need. What is your love language? Things like that. And how can they better support you? Number 4, are you comfortable advocating for me if I can't speak up? So if for whatever reason you freeze or you aren't talking, you're in the motion, you're in labor land, you are going through all the motions and you can't speak up for yourself, what are they going to do? And do they feel comfortable advocating for you? Do they know your hopes and desires and your wishes, your non-negotiables, things like that? Like, yes, if you're having a doula there, they are able to speak those things. But I always love, as a doula, seeing the partner be able to say these things and say like, hey, they don't want that or they don't need that. Or it's really sweet to see a partner step up and advocate for the birthing person and say what they want. Yeah, if you can't speak up for yourself, how is your partner advocating for you? Just have that discussion and ask that question. Another really great question to ask your partner is, have we discussed our preferences clearly so that you feel confident? What is that looking like? Do you want to go as long as possible without any pain medication? Are you planning on going completely unmedicated? What does that preference look like? Do you not want an IV port? Do you not want an epidural? Are you okay with those things? Do they feel like they know your preferences clearly and confidently, that they can know for sure what those things are and not just hand over your birth plan to the staff? Like, obviously, yes, they should be familiar with where your birth plan is and read over it, but also have them ask questions about it and have them understand what your preferences are and why you're doing these things. If you're taking a childbirth education course, and fill them in on that information too and educate them on why that's important to you. Even immediate postpartum things like the vitamin K shot or the erythromycin or circumcision. Have these conversations and make sure that you are both in agreement and you feel confident with these preferences, and talk about it beforehand. And one that a lot of different people might forget is, what do you need from me before labor so that you feel prepared? Ask your partner, what do you need from me? What do you want to know? I always lay out exactly where things are, what items I think I need, where, the hospital bag is, or where all of the birthing items are. Just making sure that they feel just as prepared as you do and all other questions are answered. Ask them, what questions do you have for me? What is going to make you feel more prepared for labor? Because labor is a team effort. Yes, you are doing the physical work. You are birthing your baby. You are bringing your baby there. But it's so important to have your support team ready and able and willing to support you in the way that you need to feel supported. And clarity reduces a lot of tension, reduces a lot of fears.
and really creates a stronger team. So, being really clear about your hopes and desires and wishes and making sure that they feel prepared and educated and informed is going to help and just go a long way. And that brings us to questions to ask yourself. I think it's really important to sit with yourself, to get deep with yourself, to really clarify what all of these different things are. And this might be the most important category of all of these different questions. Asking questions to yourself is going to be super, super helpful and super beneficial when it comes to labor. Question number one that I think is really important is, what does feeling safe look like to me? This is going to look different for everybody. Everybody's going to have their own safe space, their own little bubble, their own perfect scenario, and what makes them feel safe and seen and heard. So, what does feeling safe look like? When do you feel your safest? What can you do to create that safe space? And that leads us to question number two. What environments help me relax? What environments are going to make me feel safe? What can I put in my environment? How can I change my environment? You know, whether you are birthing at home and there is a space in your home that you feel perfectly relaxed and safe and ready to birth your baby. If this is going to be a birth center or a hospital birth, what does the hospital look like? What does the birthing center look like? What things can you bring to change that environment to help you feel more relaxed and safe? Because that is what we need in birth. That is the scenario that we really need to cultivate. And so, what kinds of things can we do to our environment to help us get there? Number three, what are my biggest fears around birth? You know, there are going to be people out there that are like, I have no fear. I'm ready. I'm going to rock this, blah, blah, blah. But maybe subconsciously, there are some fears that are lingering there. There are some things that you might be stuck up on. Or maybe you have a lot of fears. But what is your biggest fear? What is that topmost, oh my goodness, if this happened, everything would be ruined. I'm going to lose my mind. I don't know what I would do. What is that biggest fear? And then who can you talk to about that to help reduce that fear? What can you do with that fear to help dwindle that feeling down? And how can we reduce those fears about birth? Number four, what would make me feel empowered afterwards, regardless of how the birth unfolds, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whatever happens? What is going to make you feel empowered afterwards? Or what feeling do you want to have about your birth experience afterwards? What kinds of feelings do you want to have when you look back on the birth? And what would make you able to accomplish that? So, no matter what, you want to feel empowered. No matter what, you want to feel loved. No matter what, you want to feel like you did all that you could for a specific feeling or sensation. You want to look back and say, wow, like, I'm so proud of myself. Like, what do you want to feel, and what do you have to do to get that feeling regardless of the outcome of your birth? And then, what does owning your birth mean? Our course, our childbirth education course, is called Own Your Birth. OWN is different letters that stand for O is ownership and optimism, really looking at your birth in the most optimistic way possible, and then taking ownership of it, being in your power, really emulating that strength. W is worthiness, really sitting in your worth, understanding your worth, knowing that you are worthy of the birth that you desire, knowing that you have this sense of worthiness. That's what our W stands for in own. And then N is nurturing and nourishing yourself, really giving yourself what it needs to just feel safe, feel seen, feel heard, nourishing your body, and then nurturing your body, and then also nourishing your body, you know, satiating yourself, fueling your body up spiritually, physically, you know, getting the food and the nourishments that you need, but also nourishing your body in a way that your soul just feels alive and lit up. So those are the different things that we believe are circulating around when you own your birth. And so what does it mean for you to own your birth, to really take ownership over it? And how does that relate to how your birthing experience is going to go and what you would like it to look like?
And then number 6, another question to ask yourself is, if things change, what matters most? Flexibility with clarity, that is strength. That is what's giving you your momentum and your ability to navigate this birth. And if all things change, what is truly the thing that matters most? A lot of people say like, oh, like at least your baby's here, or healthy baby, healthy mom. At least you're both safe and here. Like, what is that one true thing that matters the most? Like, no matter what, this is going to be most important. If all things go out the window, if my whole birth plan just falls apart, what is the one thing that I really want to focus on and prioritize above all? So, those are really great questions to ask yourself and to help you prepare for birth, and absolutely need to be things that are done prenatally and are happening and getting answered before labor begins. Because, like I said before, we're going to be in labor land and we are going to be going through it. And these are really important questions to ask yourself before you get there. And then some other questions that are really great for either your postpartum support or your hospital or birth center, and questions that can really help is, who's bringing you meals? Are you setting up a meal train? What does overnights look like? What do the first initial weeks look like? How are you handling people holding the baby? What kind of precautions are you taking as far as protecting baby or anything like that? Who is checking in on you? That's another really great question to just ask in general. Like, who's checking in on me? Who's, making sure that I'm doing good, that I'm feeling my body, that I'm eating food, not just the baby. Everybody's going to be oohing and ahhing and asking how the baby's sleeping or how the baby's eating or what the baby's doing, but who's checking in on you? Maybe that's a best friend, maybe that's your mom, your mother-in-law, a sister, a friend, somebody, a cousin, whatever. Like, who is checking up on you and making sure that you're doing well? And then another question to just ask in general is, have you clearly communicated boundaries for visitors? You deserve rest. You deserve support that looks like how you want it to be. And asking beforehand makes it so much easier later, really drawing out those boundaries. I have multiple episodes that reference this and talk about this, and seeing what your postpartum looks like is going to be really great to nail down and figure out before baby actually comes. And then also, depending on where you're birthing, even if you're having a home birth, what kinds of things should you have prepared beforehand? There's usually a list of some sorts of what to bring to the hospital or a birth center, or just even have on hand if you are having a home birth. So what sort of things should you bring? What's your visitor policy? Are there any restrictions on movement and eating? This again goes back to asking your provider different questions and asking the hospital if you go on a tour different questions and things like that. What happens if you test positive for GBS? What happens if there's, different scenarios? What does discharge look like? Am I able to leave a couple hours after the birth? Usually at a birth center, you're able to leave relatively soon. Or at a hospital, how long do they require you to stay? Can you check yourself out early? What does that look like? And what kind of steps do you need to do in order to be discharged? So just understanding that timeline, understanding, how long you're going to be somewhere or what that is going to look like is going to be super beneficial. Just to close things out, honestly, the goal of these questions isn't to just fully lay out and say, this is exactly how my birth's going to go, but it's really so that you can enter labor with clarity and confidence. And when you're asking these questions ahead of time, you're reducing any surprises, you're reducing any kind of assumptions. You are strengthening communication between your whole birth team, between your partner, between your provider, between your doula, between the friends and family that are going to be around you and supporting you. You're building trust, you're building relationship. You are creating that environment that asking questions and getting answers is all a part of the experience. And you are stepping into that ownership of yourself and advocating for yourself and creating that environment that you want. So birth might still surprise you. It often does. But when we are walking into it prepared, this really helps allow us to respond instead of react. And so we are cultivating that experience and knowing a little bit more beforehand. So before you go into labor, really just take some time to go over some of these questions, and maybe at your prenatal appointments, maybe when you're meeting with your doula, maybe if you're just sitting down with your partner, watching a movie or sitting down with your partner, having a campfire, sitting out back, drinking some tea, or maybe your morning coffee, whatever it might be, just write some of these questions down. Maybe as you're writing these questions or you're asking those questions to yourself that I discussed, you are thinking of more questions that you want answered. So have the conversations, have the deep discussions, really go over all of these things because there's no way that you can over prepare. And it's really just honoring yourself and honoring the experience because this is you and your birth, no matter if it's your first or your fifth baby, it's all different experiences. So that's really what I love to do. That's what we do here. We enter motherhood with informed, intentional, supported conversations and experiences. And it's just super helpful to talk about these things beforehand. So even if it helps sending this episode, like I said, to your doula, to your partner, to a friend or a family member saying like, hey, I listened to this episode and there's a lot of different questions and a lot of things that come up. Let's both kind of list off some different questions and scenarios and then have a full-blown conversation and dedicate time to doing this. So if this episode was helpful, send it to somebody else who is expecting or this might be useful for. Like I said, send it to your partner, save it for your third trimester if it's something that you want to look back on and have on hand for questions to get into. And I really hope that this is just helpful in creating conversation and generating thoughts to help you prepare for your labor. So until next time, just trust your preparation, trust your process, own your birth story, and really just embrace this motherhood experience. And I'll see you later.
Thank you, mamas, so much for listening. Remember, you are a rock star. I believe in you. Let's doula this. Let's crank it up a notch and let's kick it into high gear together. Hit that subscribe button, share this episode with a friend, message me, email me, call me, beat me. You know how to reach me. We're doing this, mamas. I am so excited to catch you here next week. This is your one-stop go-to place for helping you find the resources you need to make the best choices for you and your family during pregnancy, birth, and most importantly, postpartum. See you later, mamas.